Hi, everybody, and welcome back to our weekly Fireside Chat Series here at Digital Capital Advisors. I'm Andrew Daniel. I'm a senior investment banker on the team. Digital Capital Advisors, for those of you who don't know at this point, is an investment bank. We've got offices in New York City, Berlin, and San Francisco. The bank has now just celebrated its 10-year anniversary here in the first week of September, and this show is part of that celebration. The Fireside Chat Series features hour-long conversations with world-class founders, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and operators from companies that we find interesting out in the ecosystem. Today, we've got a great guest from a company called JobRapido. We'll be talking quite a bit about the job tech space, recruiting tech space, and everything around that ecosystem. Rob, we're really excited to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. And I just heard you had your 10-year anniversary, so congratulations with that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We, as I joke about every beginning of the show, we really wanted to have a celebration. As you know, our office is up on the 76th floor of the Empire State Building, so our hope was to have a good time up there and celebrate the anniversary. But with COVID, obviously, that's off the deck for at least this year.
Maybe virtual.
not quite as much fun, but perhaps. Awesome. Well, let's get started. I think for usually it would be great to start and get some grounding on JobRapido and hear a little bit about the business, perhaps the story and evolution of how you've gotten to where you guys are today. It'd be great to hear a little bit about the technology and the USPs that you think about, and generally just set kind of the table for folks to think about the business and the sector we're going to talk a little bit more about.
Sure. So let me start. Yeah, I'm a Dutchman in Italy. I live in Italy. I'm lucky to live in Milano as a Dutchman because JobRapido is really an Italian success story. It started back in 2006 as an online job search engine and a job aggregator with a monetization model really based on arbitrage. We aggregated all jobs on the web, acquired volume traffic, low prices, of course, and then monetized through AdSense. Basically, we had one client and one supplier, Google and Google. So that was the business model, and it was quite successful back in the days. The value of aggregation was still high, and the business model was actually so successful that over the course of about 7 years, we rolled out to 58 countries all over the world. And every time we rolled out to a new country, we hired a young new student in Milan in the office. That person became the country manager of the new country that we rolled out, and that's why we still today have about 20 different nationalities in the company to have the language skills there. And the people they stick around in Milan because it's a good place. Of course, over the years, the company we didn't build much relationship with employers because it was an advertising model. So, but it created a very interesting set of assets for building a recruitment model. The skill of aggregation of jobs on the web, which was back then quite revolutionary, provided a huge amount of jobs on site. So at any given time that you went to the website, you could find 20 million jobs. There were about 55 million registered users because to get the advantage of searching jobs on the website, you needed to register, and those people received millions of emails every day. We did about 1 billion in traffic in a year, and but there was no legacy in recruitment, and obviously that triggered the interest of a lot of strategic players and also investors. And back in 2014, the company was acquired by Symphony Technology Group, the current owner of the company, and the PE fund that I work with. And the vision was really to build a valuable talent acquisition model on top of these interesting assets that I just named. That's also when I started my journey with JobRapido. I joined in 2015 after I worked 12 years at Monster.com. And I had the assignment to build a valuable talent acquisition model on top of those assets, as I just said. And that was the start of a big transformation of the business from an arbitrage advertising model into what we are today. And that arbitrage advertising model was really dying at the moment in time. The value of aggregation obviously was not there anymore, and it was all about quality and the transaction. So we needed to be quick. Just to jump forward, what we are today. Today we are collecting all quality jobs on the web. We extended our crawling capabilities extensively, and that is one of our key core skills that we have developed here. And we make all those quality jobs available to the job seekers, but we only deliver them the most relevant ones. And we use state-of-the-art search and matching techniques and our taxonomy-based matching engine for that. We use the newest digital marketing techniques to deliver our clients traffic, but also candidates on demand. So it's not, they don't have to search in the CV database, they don't have to post jobs and then wait for the applies to come in. We deliver them the candidates, and I will tell you a little bit more about that later. And that makes it all easier. We say that we basically take the work out of looking for work. We're now, we have our headquarters in Milan. We conduct businesses in 58 countries. We opened recently some offices in Amsterdam and London. We have people on the ground in Germany as well. We have, just before COVID, we had about 30 million jobs on site. With that, we rank #1 in the world of the aggregators, far ahead of players like Indeed or any other ones. And from a traffic perspective, we rank among the top 1,000 in the world, about #5 in the category of jobs with 55 million visits a month. And we have a very large registered user base, which are now fully profiled. And I will tell you a little bit more about that as well. They're profiled based upon behavior. So we don't have CVs, we store all their behavior data. And about 65% of those are active on a daily, weekly or monthly basis throughout the year. And every month we add about 1 million of new users to the community. That's why we could reach the number so quickly. That's now 100 million users on our site. We are a real technology company at heart. We're in the business of algorithms, keywords, and semantic search. So that's in a nutshell what we are today.
Well, thank you for that. I think that sets a good base as where we're going to have our conversation from here. I think what might be an interesting starting point after knowing a little bit more about the business is now to think about the evolution of the broader space, right? You think about job technology, recruiting technology, however you want to categorize it. And I think you hinted on it in the own evolution of JobRapido, which is we went from a world which was arbitrage driven for the most part, thinking about a very small spread on Google on two sides for the most part, into kind of a more of a crawl model, an aggregation model, and monetization shifted as well with regards to how monetization is done. And I think today we've ultimately evolved into platforms, and JobRapido is on the forefront of this, of leveraging technologies to better understand applicants, right? And what we can know about the applicant beyond just looking at a CV and trying to match accordingly. You mentioned behavior, but also understanding job posts and how to ultimately match those two parties together in a highly efficient way. And so it'd be great to get your take on the evolution of the space as we think more broadly, and perhaps where we're now today and what the ecosystem looks like beyond just JobRapido.
Yeah. So if you look at the evolution of online recruitment, it all started with moving the jobs from the newspaper online and duration-based posting. You posted a job and you waited until people were reacting and applying. We call that post and pray. You post a job, you pray that you get candidates. And that is something that went on for a very long time until some smart cookies came to the market and said, "Hey, you know what? With us, you don't have to pay for the job posting. You only pay for the performance that you get from the job posting, and that's the click." And it's following a little bit the shopping and the travel industry, and so everything became sort of performance based because you started to pay per click. But it didn't do the trick fully for what the customers want, because you cannot hire a click, you can hire a candidate. So that was the mismatch also that we recognized in the marketplace and said, listen, what companies want is qualified candidates to hire, and what they can buy is duration-based postings and pay-per-click models, which is all post and pray. And I think that 3 years ago, that switch was made in the market, that hey, we need to start looking at connecting our hiring funnel to the apply. And that was the first step in the evolution. And we recognized that as well, but we went a little bit further from that perspective. And one day, one of my guys in the team said, hey, listen, when you look at the experience that a job seeker has on a job board, and compare that to the experience you have on an online shopping site like Amazon, it's a world of difference.
Sure.
Why can I not have an Amazon experience when I'm looking for a job? And if you think of Amazon, you think of all products which come from their own warehouse, but also from third parties. And you think of all consumers that are coming there. I don't know, what is it? This 80% of people in the US buy via Amazon. But you only receive the most relevant content, and you're not being hassled by retargeting and that kind of stuff, because Amazon knows what you want, and the checkout is very, very easy. It's very easy to pay. It's very easy to buy a product and then get it delivered at your house. So with that idea, we thought, okay, we are already an aggregator. We have all jobs on the internet, so that's a good match. On the other hand, we have a massive amount of job seekers that we bring together. But the big pain in the marketplace is finding the right job and having the right match and get them delivered to you. So why don't we create that? And that is the big step, I think, forward up the hiring funnel, that you get your jobs delivered on demand. And we do that through email. So every day we send about 20 million emails to job seekers, which amounts to 600 million emails a month. And they are job alerts, and they get the jobs that they want in their inbox. And they're all those matches are all based upon their intent.
Sure.
So we created a taxonomy of jobs. On the one hand, we classified all jobs against the taxonomy. Then we take the job seekers and we profile them to the taxonomy based upon their click behavior and their search terms, and we start sending them only relevant jobs. And that's a big difference on where we're coming from, because there was, you posted a job, it's all duration based, it's a keyword match, nothing is stored, everything is CV, to, hey, let's copy the experience of the shopping world or the travel environment, and make sure that you only get relevant data at the moment that you want it. And that is the evolution that we are going through right now. And I think it's going to go up all the way to the higher on demand, but that's where we see the whole trajectory going.
Yeah, and we can talk about where we think we're headed beyond that in a second or in a couple minutes. But for me, the innovation that you guys have built is really very much what you're hinting at, which is we go from a place which was kind of spray and pray, post and pray, send everything out, not very targeted, highly inefficient for enterprise, highly inefficient for the end consumer, the actual jobbee, right, person looking for the job, into a world where if we can begin to build a customer data understanding, thinking about both sides, right, thinking about the job post and what the ideals are of that job post, what is it really looking for if you peel back the layer, and sometimes that's more than just the language. And then two, more importantly, what can we understand about the job seeker? And I think there's a significant expansion that needs to exist there. And I think you guys are on the forefront of it. It's beyond just, okay, here's what their CV looks like. Here's the kinds of roles they might be interested in. But instead, their intent, their behavior, their characteristics, their preferences. It's a very broad array. And for us, when you merge those two worlds together, you get to exactly what you're talking about, which is the optionality to give somebody out of an aggregator site, which again, the challenge of aggregation sometimes is there's so much, it's really hard to cut it. And so you get this difficulty of delivery. And I think we see key players in the marketplace all the time struggle with this, giving really bad suggestions, doing a poor job of giving hiring managers the ability to match with candidates. Maybe LinkedIn's an example, right? There are others as well that have struggled. But if you can understand the job seeker, right, the end customer, very powerful stance to begin with and very valuable as a database. And the more customized you can get with them, the higher your fill rate, the higher the ability to go place people, the higher the quality of candidate when they get to interview. And as I think about the measurement of platforms like JobRapido, scale is really important. Agreed. I think scale is more important now than it's ever been before because the scale can be monetized. Back in the days of pure R-based or pay-per-click, the scale is a little bit more difficult to monetize. We see this all the time with advertising-based businesses in different sectors who come to me and say, look, we're the largest business in this space by a mile, but we're only doing a little bit of monetization because it's hard to fill our ads files. But for job seeking and platforms and aggregators, it's a little bit easier to connect those dots. Two, I think it's really about the idea that you have scale. Now we need to understand how to get people to value that scale, right? And one of the ways is to cut the database down into something that's much more concise and targeted, which I think you guys have done. And then lastly, where I think the measurement component is, it's really important is, what is the quality for the hirer, right? The folk who's actually posting the job, and we get them a candidate and say, okay, here is your applicant. Can we demonstrate that quality of applicant is significantly higher and we're able to get it to them more efficiently and faster? And if you can, then that's a wonderful recipe for monetization that many have tried to kind of go execute against, but have struggled because when it comes to the interview, they find that candidate maybe isn't a fit, or it's a slower process, or it's the wrong one, whatever it might be. So that's how we think about the broad spectrum. Yeah. I think, you go ahead, sorry, we cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just confirming.
Yeah.
No, it is absolutely right. And we see that happening, that our conversion rates are much higher. But if you think about it, all companies that are serious about hiring have applicant tracking systems, but they can only start measuring from the moment that they get the applicant. Exactly. And then it goes into the funnel. They measure the conversion to interviewing or inviting to interviews, and then offerings, etc., and all the way up the funnel. And we see that those parts of the funnel we really optimize. The cool thing about this is only about the matching, right? So making sure that we only deliver the right jobs to the candidate, and then the right candidates to the employer. But what the community allows, and it's a profiled community with first-party data, which is us. We have click behavior, we have their search statement, sure. But then we have enriched that data with third-party data. So that we can build a real programmatic offering, which means that you can go beyond targeting only on the intent data, but now more demographic data, which you can add to your audience targeting. So you can post your job, but you can also use our text slots on our search engine result page, which you can very targeted go after audiences that you want, which you normally cannot do on a job board or on an aggregator, but you can do on Google, or you can do on Facebook. So we have display advertising that is also facilitating the branding, very targeted on audiences, and all on the 100 million people that are in our community, all profiled from that perspective. What happens then is that if you look at companies that have recruitment budgets, 30% of that recruitment budget normally goes to job boards, but 50%, 40 to 50% goes to the over-the-top players, right, for very targeted campaigning. And we have never ever been able, and me and Monster, we've never been able, or anywhere else, to open up that budget. Now that we have the programmatic offering, you open up that budget as well. And the thing is that, if you're talking about USPs, you said you want to hear something about USPs. Even against Google and Facebook, you can, in a very protected environment where you don't have any competition, which you have obviously when you do that via the other players, you can target audiences very, very sharply. And obviously that is very attractive in the whole mix of doing your recruitment campaigning. And then the last piece, because now I call that active campaigning, because I just use my emails to go out on demand to the job seekers, and driving as many candidates as the client wants from the places and the level they want it. I use the text advertising that is very targeted on our profit community and the display. But then I obviously need to make sure that offer and demand or supply and demand is being connected. And that is where I go outside and do my traffic acquisition and my candidate acquisition, and I use my taxonomy for that as well. And there I match the offer and demand. So you get a platform which is fully rounded and self provisioning. You know, that's well, the whole core of the business model. And I think that is totally a copy of what's happening in the shopping world.
Wow. No, absolutely. And one of the things we talk about a lot on the show, we've had a number of CDPs on, customer data platforms. And for me, what you're describing feels and looks a lot like an early version of a customer data platform, right? But I think this is where skill and scale fits in, right? So as we think about the broader stacks, we just step back and think about advertising technology or marketing technology and large first-party data sets. You ultimately have the walled gardens, right? So you've got the Googles, you've got the Amazons, you've got the Facebooks of the world. And the advantage they have is they have really large data scale, right? And then they can go do whatever they like with that data scale. That data scale, though, is fairly focused. It's on the use case. So Facebook has a particular use case. Amazon, is a simple example, has lots of e-commerce data, what folks are shopping for. Google might have something else, whatever it might be. When you come into job seekers and you come into platforms and aggregators and recruitment tools, that's a very specific data set that you're capturing. But what happens is with the scale that you're operating at and traffic scale, profile scale, the amount of MAUs that you guys operate at, it begins to build this very interesting first-party mini walled garden, if you will, that the data becomes highly valuable. And this, again, I mentioned LinkedIn earlier. This is what LinkedIn sells all day long, is they talk about, look, we really understand a lot of data points about the end customer in a commercial corporate setting because we have all their profiles on LinkedIn and there's some value there. And they've tried to take that targeting data and move it towards jobs with mixed avail. But for me, what you're describing is that aggregation component, right? And that for us, as I talk about all the time, is increasingly commoditized. In this space, it's less commoditized because there's not as many people who have the data scale to even do the aggregation because the first party data is so difficult. So there's more value there that exists. But if you can pull that data in, you talk about enriching it, there's lots of additional data to add to it in a safe way that builds out the profile for you. What you end up having is this really interesting base of, hey, effectively a customer profile, right? A persistent customer profile to say, look, here's exactly what I know about this person. Forget the idea of just looking at their CV. Here's everything else you want to know about them. And that informs your ability to derive, which we really care about and talk about all the time, actionable insight, right? And once you have the actionable insight, and this is a difficult layer, and this is where I think LinkedIn has struggled, if you can build the actionable insight layer and say, now I've got this data, here's where I might use AI/ML, here's where I might use some kind of informed decision-making, I can then tell you when I go out into my site, I can match the right folks, right? And we take it to execution. And in platforms like JobRapido, the execution is much closer than what you see in the open web setting of a traditional CDP. And so you end up building this use case that goes from proprietary data aggregation with first-party data that's really valuable and the scale is correlating to that first-party data value through to execution and matching, which then benefits the other side of the equation. And so again, for me, it's this very interesting combination that feels like a small CDP almost, but has lots of opportunity to grow because ultimately there's so many more actionable insights that can be generated to get better at targeting. And in theory, if you're leveraging AI/ML, you should be able to get smarter over time anyway. So that to me is the crux of your business that is really exciting. And what it tells me is if there were more resources available, right, whatever that scale might be, of course I'm a banker, so I think like this, maybe there's even a greater opportunity to take that and run with it and move in every direction. So again, that's how I think about the business and really what makes you unique, kind of the central crux, and what's interesting in the broader ecosystem as well.
Yeah, and it's all about automation because I don't think we need more resources from that perspective. But the automation in the end, if you can really connect all the three pieces together and make the machine in an automated way work, because there's a lot of yield management that needs to be done. There's a lot of campaign. We are basically also an agency inside, so. But the automation is really the core of everything, and we're moving. That's when during COVID period of 5 months we really moved ahead very, very fast on that.
Yeah, 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 that's great. And how do you think about kind of the key of technology? So maybe you can dive in a little bit on how you guys are using technology inside of that equation that I laid out, and maybe some of the technologies that you guys are using, particularly as it comes to that actionable insights and matching. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, yeah, the core of everything is our taxonomy, that taxonomy based matching, where we use Elasticsearch for making that happen. We are now almost in the Google Cloud. Most of our data is in the Google Cloud, and that helps a lot because the world of AI opens up and everything becomes easy. We use a lot of machine learning, obviously, because if you for instance, we use for ranking our jobs on the website. This was a really nice trick. We needed to marry the relevance with the monetization, and on the surface it looks that it bites each other. You want to show the highest paid job first. But that's not necessarily the most relevant job. So if you go to pure relevance, you don't make money. So we went to something that we called RPI ranking, revenue per impression, and because the impression shown makes a click-through rate, and then you go to revenue per impression, and you learn from every click, and basically the job after 2-3 days is fully optimized. You know what the revenue per impression is, and that's how the ranking is being generated on our website. Yeah, and so you don't sacrifice relevance for revenue, revenue, right? It's really interesting, because a job that pays 10 cents can be much more profitable for us because it's clicked so much than a job of 30, 40, 50, 60 a dollar per click. That makes if it makes sense what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, absolutely it does. And I think, again, some of the folks that listen to these things really like to understand the technicals. And so getting an understanding of what that looks like, I think, is helpful. Let's talk a little bit about what kind of blocks adoption today. So as you think about enterprise use, as you think about the job seeker, what is still blocking the adoption of platforms like JobRapido? How do you think about the spends that exist in the space? We mentioned kind of over-the-top spending versus aggregator spending versus some of the alternatives. Can you give a feel of what that looks like and what maybe some of the blockers are that exist in today's ecosystem?
Yeah. If you go to companies, the budget for recruitment for over-the-top players doesn't sit with HR; it sits with marketing, and so it's very split. So basically, so that also, but with a lot of companies, you see a lot of digital marketeers moving into the HR department. So that helps a lot. But because the traditional HR and recruitment professionals don't know much about this world, I think that's one of the blockers. That's also why it didn't go as fast as in the shopping and the travel world, because there it was already all about digital advertising. They just needed to adopt new techniques and so on. That was much harder with the HR world. That's now happening, and the way we are trying to tackle the obstacles. I cannot talking to HR professionals about a programmatic recruitment solution is not something that really works. But so our proposition is we deliver you on-demand qualified candidates. And there's two elements to it. Obviously, we deliver you qualified candidates, and we can do that because of our technology of matching. The way we deliver only relevance to our job seekers. That they're the first thing that when I say qualified, is not pre-selected or selected, or they're qualified based upon the fact, hey, they have shown interest in these kind of jobs before. They've saved and clicked these jobs. They've applied on these kind of jobs, and they are active. So high risk of high likelihood that they are interested in and matching with your job opportunity.
Right.
But then I deliver them also on demand. So what's happening a lot is that the post and pray thing is really bad for especially in volume recruiting. It's something that you need to overcome. So the on-demand piece is highly attractive, and because they only pay for a result, they only pay for a candidate, they pay per apply. And not per click or whatever, because our model is pure for these companies. They pay per apply. There's no risk. And then, of course, I explain them that I will create a campaign which comprises of, hey, your job posting goes on our search engine result page. We will do some text advertising to make sure that your audiences are targeted perfectly. We will do some display if you want to also see your brand to the right audiences. We will do on-demand email campaigns where we extract your target group. Okay, you're looking for paralegals in Manchester. I have here a group of 1,500 in a radius of 100 kilometers of paralegals with a confidence score of 30%. I will send them this campaign, and that's how it goes. And then I will bring them back to you. But they don't have to know that. They will just see the results. Yeah, they will see the results, and that is what works, and that's why we're full service in that sense. So yeah, the obstacle is obviously that they need to understand, and you need to overcome that they don't need to understand. So that's and the whole market is moving towards the performance-based model now. Every big recruiter is looking at how conversion rates work, how the apply rate is, and how it converts further. So that helps our adoption of our solution much more.
Yeah, 100%. I think, again, your point at the USP, which is the granularity of targeting, is pretty unbelievable relative to the folks that exist out in the ecosystem. So very interesting to hear the use case. Let me ask you about COVID, because I think this is a space that had, and we were talking about it before the call even, had some significant effects given COVID and the effects on hiring. I think from our side, we obviously saw folks release a lot of people, make headcount cuts and make changes just given the conservative planning they were having. I'll give you my view in a minute, which you've already heard, but I'll give it for everybody else. It'd be great to get your thoughts on how COVID affects the broader ecosystem and what that looks like, both historically and moving forward.
So from, wow, I remember what was it I think it was March 7th or 8th or something. I woke up and I saw all of a sudden 40% of the traffic boom was down, and the jobs just went down, and then oh my God, what's happening? So everything froze, and that was for a couple of months really something that hurt us really bad. But immediately we adopted a methodology we call plan ahead, which is a McKinsey methodology where you split basically the team into one takes care of the immediate needs and execution of the crisis, and the other one starts already thinking about all the steps up to the return to the marketplace, and start to reimagine what's coming after, and then start to validate if the broad direction of travel that you are doing with your company is still the right one. We're delivering, our mission is to become the Amazon for jobs. We deliver on-demand qualified candidates. Is this still correct even after COVID? And we think yes. We validate it and we say budget will be shrinking, HR departments will be smaller, capacity will be less, and getting value for your buck is hugely important. So performance-based models are very attractive. So from that perspective, it all fit. So yeah, that's how we went in, and we saw it happening around us. Everybody went through the same. All job boards had the same issues. All aggregators. So yeah, but then. I don't know if that's if you want me to go already how it works when we get out.
No, I think, yeah, let's talk a little bit about the future. What do you think about recovery, and how do you think about that playing out down the road?
And then you want to know more from the marketplace, the ecosystem, or from our side?
More from the marketplace and the ecosystem in broad strokes, less so about you guys specifically.
Yeah, so I think that what we're currently seeing is that basically we are the barometer of the economy. We are the first to notice. Very often, you guys look at staffing companies and recruiters, and but
Sure.
we are before. You know, I can see the jobs coming in, and if they start posting jobs, that's the indicator.
Good sign.
Yeah, and already in August, I saw that they were returning to the marketplace. First, the job boards and some very specific players. You know, the delivery companies, the Amazons, and all the digital companies that are really taking advantage of this situation. But the budgets came in, but not the jobs. And about 4 weeks ago, the jobs also started to come back to the marketplace, and not only with the usual suspects, but also across the board we saw the jobs growing. It's still minus 20-25% year on year if you look at the jobs, but it's much better than what we saw in April, when it was minus 40-50% in the number of jobs. I think that if we don't see another lockdown coming, and especially here in Europe, I think that it looks like we got it's not under control, because every country, just like in the US, every state does different things. Also here, every country does different things.
Sure.
But schools are opening up. You know, my kids went to school on Monday, and Milan is very busy. Amsterdam is very busy. Businesses, people start to go back to work. Of course, we see that the infections start to grow again, but hospitals stay empty, and that's good. So if that can continue, I think that it can go very fast, but it can also come to a stop. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But we all can benefit from that in our industry.
Yeah. No, and I think I'll say what I said pre this call, which is that, you know, for us, it's tied to the economy, right? You guys are very much macro correlated to the economic quality that's out there. And I think we're at a spot now where globally the markets have recovered really significantly. Corporates, so big strategic acquirers and strategic hirers, went out and said, let's pull down every dollar or euro of cash that we can pull down. Let's make sure that we plan for the absolute worst case scenario and figure out how bad it could be. And we'll make cuts accordingly now to make sure that we're safe and we don't affect the core health of the business. And what they found out was it wasn't that bad, right? And that's a good thing to find out. Perhaps it wasn't as big of a dip as they thought. And so all of a sudden they've got a ton of cash on the balance sheet. The business is more effective and efficient than it's ever been before, because the heads are out that work some of the fat. And the numbers are going in the right direction again in most industries, although obviously notable outliers that exist here. Then at the same time, share prices have performed in some sectors at levels that are far in excess where we were pre-COVID, and in others certainly at similar levels. And so I think now from a banking perspective, we look at the public markets and think really high valuations. Whether or not those are fair is debatable. There's definitely a split now between public company valuation and private company valuation. We're seeing that wedge grow larger and larger. But a lot of folks are kind of holding their breath to think about what happens, right? And so if we're in a scenario now where these levels hold, and certainly gets us through the election in the US, some of the macro trends in Europe as well, but the US election has a very significant effect globally. But if we carry into 21 and the public company valuations remain at these elevated levels, and companies keep going up and to the right, then hiring levels are going to be really heavy, right? I mean, I think what we're going to see is an overcorrection on the output side of getting rid of folks means there's also going to be an overcorrection with regards to hiring folks back. And so that's really great for the ecosystem in aggregate. But what exists obviously is a systematic risk, as it does for everybody else. But I think in this space is particularly pungent is that, you know, if it goes the other way and we either have secondary recurrences, we have a significant public company valuation correction, we see that revenue is difficult, and some of the key indicators economically, which today are performing fairly subpar, continue to degrade, you know, you're going to be in a spot where as an industry, job volume is just going to come down, and there's naturally a volatility against revenue that exists there. And so this industry is one that's very interesting. And over the last 10 years, right, or even the last 5 years, everything has been up and to the right without a blink. And so it's really easy to continue to grow revenue when the number of jobs that are being posted grows and grows and grows. We see startups pay more and more and become attractive. So you get a spread of where folks are hiring from. And so all the good indicators that are there exist. And if it continues, I think we'll be in a really great spot. And so that's how we get a read. And it sounds like we're pretty well aligned with regards to what that looks like into 21, with, I think, a lot of risk that still exists and is just up in the air.
Yeah, there's two things I want to say to that. There's a difference between the EU and the EU and the US.
Sure.
Because here you got all these support packages from the government
Of course.
that still exist also here in Italy, which prevented a lot of layoffs, and also that's why there was not a lot of income loss and consumer spending kept up, and that's why you see now a very strong rebound in Germany. The Netherlands, but even in Italy it starts to happen, and
Sure.
a little less in Spain and France. But as these support packages start to loosen up a little bit and become a little bit more difficult to acquire, so only for the more hit companies they are still using it, because there is limitations to using it, of course. Also, the market starts to become more flexible of hiring, and people are starting to move jobs, and people start to hire again. And I think that you can therefore come out even quicker. Where I now already see that the US has a huge surge of jobs, and on our website it's really remarkable. We saw 30% increase in jobs like month over month, which is not seasonal. It's there. And then the other thing is that in our model, and this is more specific to I think JobRapido, the moment that well, it's probably for the whole sector, but it's the power of the power shifted from the job seeker to the employer.
Yeah, sure.
And it's much easier now to acquire traffic.
Yeah.
And with us, we have a because we connect the offer, supply and demand. We use a lot of Google to acquire talent, and Bing to acquire talent, and we use a taxonomy for that. But there is an investment attached to that. That attachment can go down because our SEO goes up, our brand traffic goes up, all our natural sources go up, and we can bring that down. So that even if the economy goes sideways, that piece is going up and that piece is going down. So
yeah. You mentioned the fiscal policy in the EU, which I think is certainly relevant to businesses like yours. And in the US, we obviously had a very significant gift, if you will, to folks who made beneath a certain income. And we had a bolstering of the unemployment, right? It's on a monthly basis. The unemployment level in some cases were so high that it was actually more valuable for folks to be unemployed than employed. And that begins to really shift the incentives of, are you going to go out and look for a job or not? And we can debate the politics on it. But again, that's where we ended up. And the question became, when that ended, which is now over, what happens to job seekers when they go out to market? And we've seen a pretty significant drop with regards to unemployment rates, right? Back where we were in March, February, it's been a notable drop, if not even a historic drop. And I think, what we continue to think about in the US is, what does that mean as we move forward here? How does fiscal policy continue to affect the ability to hire in the US, and how does it affect the US corporates now that a lot of that stuff is dissipating? But in aggregate, the US has always been less aggressive with regards to fiscal support of the average citizen relative to some of the EU nations, where, again, you point to Germany or the Netherlands, particularly Germany is a prime example, which will say, look, we'll do almost anything, just keep them employed and in place. And that's a very interesting thing to see. I was reading something this morning in Bloomberg, I think, and looking at some of the data around job seekers, and I think they just had a stat that we've now set a record high in the near term of folks who are actually leaving their jobs by choice, so effectively quitting to then go look for mobility. And that's a really good indicator of confidence with regards to the quality of the hiring market in an environment where, I agree with you, the power has shifted back to the hirer, right? The actual company that's going to hire an employee. But seeing folks leave jobs just organically and by choice indicates that at least they believe there's a secondary opportunity that exists for them. And that's a really good confidence indicator with regards to recovery, at least in our view.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But every company is now being judged on how they behaved during COVID.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that causes the huge churn that we're starting to see right now. If you have created a very unstable and uncertain environment, you're paying the price now.
Yeah. And I also think that working from home has changed the way folks think about things, right? I think there's all of a sudden, wow, I like this working from home idea. I'd like to do this more frequently. Do I really want to go back to an office, or do I want to continue to be with my family in a small place? And of course, there are people who look at it and go, yes, I want to go back to the office as soon as possible. But there's other folks who say, no, I'd like to stay. So that's there. But I think churn is in general really good for the industry, right? As long as there's hiring demand, right? As long as you have a continual flow of demand, then churn is great because it's more people that are out in the ecosystem for you to place.
makes the world turn for us. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember from my monster period of time, we would have marketing campaigns. When things were bad, we were incentivizing employees to, stay sharp, move jobs, follow your calling. But then we went to the employers the other way around. So yeah.
Exactly. Well, let's move to the last part, which is, where do you think this is all headed, right? We've talked about where we are today. We've talked a little bit about where we're headed, but as you think about your thesis in the space, maybe it's for JobRapido, maybe it's for the ecosystem even more broadly, where do you think about where are we headed? What comes next? What's the next evolution for the space? It's a big question, but it would be great to get your thoughts.
Well, I think that it is something that has been happening, but it goes slow sometimes and then a bit harder. If you think of the value line of hiring, the highest value you can bring to an employer is the hire, right? And then preferably on demand, and then preferably someone that fits your culture immediately, is immediately productive and stays forever. So that's the highest value. And if you look where we are, we're pretty down here if you look at online recruitment. It's still the pay-per-click is just, well, actually, even in Germany, it's not even accepted. There's still a lot of post and pray and duration-based posting in Germany.
What did I tell you about the Germans?
They're quite traditional but effective. But it's true. So but it will move up the value line more and more. And as we can measure better, data becomes available better, and we can connect this whole funnel all together. This is our main focus, getting all these applicant tracking systems to connect to our system so that we can measure the full funnel and prove that things that the hire came from here, and the cost per hire is being you can calculate the cost per hire. So I think in the end, I don't think that you will outsource the hire, but I think that up till delivering qualified candidates that are fully screened and assessed, it's going to go up there, and then the company only needs to do the last interview and the hiring piece. So that's where it's going, and I think that platforms like ours are going to be playing a big role in it. We haven't completed. All the other industries have completed the focus on the transaction, because that's what it's about, right? It's all about the transaction. With us now, the transaction is still on the application. The application is the transaction, where in the shopping world it's the buy. The transaction is the real buy. We need to move the real transaction up to the hiring or the acceptance of a candidate for an offer, and that's where it's going. But we are not even there. We are not focusing. All the companies that are still focusing on everything that's before the transaction, the real transaction between the job seeker and the employer, they need to move fast. So get there, because that's where there's only the starting point, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is a lot of room to run and grow, right? I think you're pointing out now, we are early in the evolution of what we ultimately want to get to. The thing that excites me, and I think you're hinting at it, and I talked about it earlier, is really the idea that in aggregate, if you look at the industry, and JobRapido, again, kind of being on the forefront of this, the use of data, particularly scaled data, is really poor, right? There is so much inefficiency, so many dollars or euros, whatever currency you want to name, that's just going into a terrible use of spend and kind of just being evaporated in the space. And some of that's pay-per-click, some of that is traditional, some of that's legacy, but again, it's just, there's a mess that happens there, a lot of inefficiency. And I think the antidote to that inefficiency is the ability to leverage data targeting. And that, I call it audience understanding in an open web setting, but the ability to say, look, I understand this person. Here's all the information I have about this candidate. Here's everything they're looking for. Here is kind of the pre-vetting that I did. And that has to ultimately be fully automated, right? It's inefficient to think that there's a manual pre-screening process. It has to be 100% absolutely automated. And on the flip side, I think there needs to be a better understanding of what goes into the job post, right? What do we know about this job with regards to the kinds of candidates that not only do we know have interest in this kind of job, which is great, but actually succeed in this job, right? Can we look beyond where we typically get stuck, which is typically the hire funnel to begin with? I agree with you. That first interview is normally where the data disappears, but can we either API integrate? Can we figure out how to get that data back so that we can get smarter both on the individual, right? And say, okay, here's an individual that went through the second round interview but didn't work, and here's why, in a quantified data way. And that's a really difficult linkage to make, but to flow it back, to get smarter in our CDP, if you want to call it that. But then also say, now that I look at this job post for a paralegal, like you mentioned, I know that the optimal candidate is 2 years of experience, probably comes from this background. They've had a really great experience with these kinds of candidates, but a lot of that happens beyond the view of a platform like JobRapido today. So you have to figure out how to discount that. Yeah. But for me, that ability to get as good as you can against the line, right? And I'm talking about a holy grail scenario that we'd be kidding ourselves to say it's an easy one to accomplish. I think it's a very difficult one that I'm laying out. It's not impossible. But moving along the line, that ability to do really high quality data targeting, which ultimately means that you can go into an employer and say, look, you need 28 candidates. I've got 28 candidates. I have a very high level of conviction that these are super high quality and matches for you to a point where you can shrink down your hiring funnel and feel really good about the quality you're going to pay me for these and pay me to do it. That's where I get excited about, and that's where I think we're headed. And for me, the key that exists, what we're missing today is a few things. A, it's the data scale, right? Both first party and third party data, understanding the bake of what needs to go in there. 2, it's the linkage. I think the linkage is still relatively poor, particularly as we get into the higher funnel that typically happens at the corporate. That data is not flowing back, which is a challenge. And then lastly, I think the technology challenge that I'm laying out here is a big one, and one that still needs to be evolved on. Again, I think about JobRapido as being at the forefront of it, but there's more of a lift to be done here. Let's not kid ourselves. Yeah. But if you have those things, all of a sudden you become this very powerful, very efficient, very monetizable core that sits behind, in a holy grail setting, all of hiring.
No, absolutely true. And then all starts with the data, of course. And our data migration to the cloud was the first huge step that we needed to make. The other thing that companies sometimes, you can bring the best qualified candidate to a company, but then why are they not being hired? Or why are they not attracted to the company? And what we also provide, because I told you before, we are sort of an agency, we show how they are competing, how the companies are competing in a certain space. So again, let's go to Manchester. If you're hiring a qualified accountant, but you're asking for too many skills, too low salary, etc., we can show them how they are competing in that space and what other companies that have maybe a better brand are asking, and how they can optimize their. And this is all data driven. This is all data driven. We basically write it's not to the point that we can automate it, but we basically write the job description, or at least the qualifications that they should ask if they want to be put in a high likelihood that they can attract the talent that they want.
Yeah. I think one of the excuses that we hear a lot from platforms is it's qualitative, right? It isn't quantitative. We get a sense they either layer in a services component where it's heavy services and there's literally somebody who's going in there and holding hands and getting feedback on phone calls from people, and it's not automated. Or they say, well, when you get into interviews, it's really difficult to capture the reason they're saying no, right? We can't understand why they're saying no, right. And so we can't get it back, so we can't optimize. It's qualitative. And I think you guys have done a great job, and you just pointed an example of quantitative data capture. Here is how data in a quantitative format, when optimized, can generate great outcomes. And you guys call it an agency or search, whatever it might be, but that is a really key differentiator, and that's what needs to happen in the industry. And that quantitative data needs to continue to be stretched out all the way to hire. And that's just a change in the way HR thinks about things, a change in the way hiring managers want to go operate. And that's a lift, right? That's just time. But again, if you do that, then we're laying out the same scenario and it becomes super exciting.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And but we're not that far away. So I think that it's closer than we think.
Yeah, which is great.
And we can. The great thing is that you can just look at the other industries. You look at the travel industry.
Well, exactly.
And the shopping industry. You just copy copy what they are doing.
There's some nice playbooks out there for you.
There's some nice playbooks, yeah. Page one.
Awesome. Well, hey, Rob, this has been really a pleasure. I appreciate you being on the show. I think everybody's going to enjoy this, and I really enjoyed the conversation with you.
Same here. Likewise. Thank you for having me, and well, talk next time.
My pleasure.